All right. Well, in today's video, I'm going to talk about avoiding burnout and the phrase, you are where your attention is, and how those two actually go together. Because I know that there's a lot of people out there. I felt this way myself. I've gone through some burnout at different points in my life. And so I want to talk a little bit about it. Earlier today, I recorded a live video with my friend Phil Gerbyshak, and on there we were talking about happiness, avoiding burnout, and kind of going through change. And as happens, since you know me, if you've been listening to me for a while, I like to talk, and we ran out of time. And so we'd already kind of come up with the topic beforehand to also address avoiding burnout. And I realized after we got done that I didn't talk about avoiding burnout as much as I had planned to. So here we go. Here's the video about that. So, if you saw the other video, some of this may be a little bit of a repeat, but let me just explain a couple of the things that we talked about to provide you with some context for talking about you are where your attention is and avoiding burnout. Okay. And so, as part of this, Phil asked me, what I see as happiness. And, I replied with gratitude and love. And there's more about that in that video. But when we got to the point about talking about change, I brought up a few things as to how change is easier for me. And part of that is I choose not to have 1 foot here and 1 foot there. I tend to, when I'm ready to change, I jump and I just change and I don't look back. And so let me give you a little bit more context behind what I mean there. And this will help explain how this concept ties into burnout. Okay. So in a lot of ancient spiritual traditions, there's a concept of a shamanic death. And that is the idea where, as an individual, you are shedding the old you and you are becoming a new you. And sometimes those processes can actually be very painful because, again, think about things in nature that go through transformation or transmutation, like a phoenix. A phoenix has to burn up into ashes in order to emerge new as a new phoenix. Okay. When snakes shed their skin, same kind of thing. A layer of that snake is coming off. And so that happens for all of us in different aspects of our life, because today you're a different person than you were yesterday. Why? Because you either added or shed some things from who you were yesterday. And so again, back to this idea of shamanic death, one way that it's kind of described is that you are walking across a bridge, going from one life to another, going from one set of beliefs to another, maybe going from one relationship to another. And so the analogy is put in there about it being like a bridge. And this isn't a nice solid bridge like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This is like an Indiana Jones rope bridge where it's perilous. And actually what happens often is the bridge disappears underneath you. Or as you're walking across the bridge is collapsing behind you. And so, where this comes in, related to this topic of burnout is, often when we find ourselves in suffering in our life, it's because we have our feet in two different places. 1 foot is on the ground, 1 foot is on the train, and the train starts moving, right? At that point, you really have to decide, am I going to put both feet on the train or am I going to put both feet on the ground? because if you try to have them in two different places, your legs start getting stretched and it becomes very painful at that point. Okay. And so again, there's a point at which we have to make a decision. And so a lot of the suffering happens when we don't want to make a decision. We choose to be in two places at the same time. Okay. And so that's kind of one of the concepts. Now, let me explain you are where your attention is. And then I'm going to tie these two together in talking about burnout. Okay. So, again, one of the things that I have been taught and that I choose to live by is you are where your attention is. You are where your attention is. You are where your attention is. Okay, so I said it 3 times. Now you've heard it. Now, this phrase has many, 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 many different meanings, and is one of those things that can mean a lot of different things at different points in one's life. But the way I want to talk about it today is if you think about the human scale of consciousness that David Hawkins talked about, or you think about kind of the scale of emotions, some other people have done some things around that, different emotions emit different frequencies and vibration. And so you can see there's certain things that have crept into our language like, oh, that's high vibe, or I'm feeling really low today, right? Some things like that happen because often those lower frequency emotions or states of consciousness, they vibrate at a lower level, and often it is slower and not so nice to be in. So what do I mean? Well, some things like shame, guilt, anger, right? Some of those kinds of things are considered lower states of consciousness, lower emotions. And so, as opposed to some higher frequency sorts of emotions or states of consciousness like courage, love, gratitude, some other things like that. And so how this all relates together is, where you choose to place your attention is where you are. And so if I choose to place my attention on feeling ashamed, on feeling depressed, then I'm placing my attention there. And so where am I? I am ashamed. I am depressed, right? But I also have a choice to be able to instead place my awareness on something like gratitude, love, happiness in those other places. And so the idea being is that, again, once you become aware and know that maybe you're in a state of consciousness that you don't want to be in, you're feeling an emotion that you don't want to be feeling. There's kind of some ways that you can go through and release and replace. And I talk about that more in the video with Phil. And maybe I'll do, and I put links to the Facebook. I'm not sure if it's up or down, but anyway, on the description associated with this video, there's a link to the live video on LinkedIn and also the live video on Facebook. So you can watch it there. And like I said, I may talk about that again a little bit later, but for today, this is what we're talking about, right? And so the idea is, again, where you choose to place your attention is where you are. And so how does this relate to burnout? Well, what ends up happening a lot of times, and especially in places like the corporate world, sometimes people get into a state where they call burnout. Okay. And if we think about that from a state of consciousness, from an emotional perspective, usually when we get into a state of burnout, we're kind of feeling depressed. We're not motivated. We lack courage. And so those are some of the things that we're often feeling. And so how does somebody get to burnout, and how do we actually avoid the burnout? And so the issue comes in is that often in our jobs, in our life, we spend a lot of time in some of these states of consciousness. And if we spend too much time in some of those, it drags us down. It slows down our vibration and frequency, slows down, removes, lowers us from an emotional state. And we don't really feel like doing anything. And the more, if you're working a lot, if you're kind of being abused at work in a way, because you're in kind of a hostile environment or an environment that's not very healthy and is kind of toxic, if you spend most of your time in those areas and you're placing most of your attention on those things, then you start to burn out. Your energy starts to drain out of you. Okay. Because again, a simple little concept is these lower frequency vibrations actually drain your battery. The higher frequency states of consciousness actually add to your battery. And so think about it. You wake up in the morning, you're feeling pretty good. Maybe you're a little tired. You get a couple cups of coffee in you, right? And all of a sudden you start to feel a little bit better. And then you go to work and some things happen, right? And all of a sudden you woke up kind of energized, excited, maybe happy. But then some things started happening to you that started draining your energy during the day. And you start placing attention and awareness on those things. Oh, I can't believe so-and-so said that. Oh, I got disrespected. Oh, my boss is such a jerk. I can't believe that he's expecting me to have this. He just told me about it today, right? And it's going to take me a week to do. How am I going to do it, right? Blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden we drag ourselves down. And so when we're in those areas, if we don't take the opportunity to actually raise ourselves up out of the gutter, then we're going to drain ourselves out. And if we drain ourselves low enough, we end up hitting that point of burnout. So how do we not do that? Well, we try to, again, place awareness on what am I feeling? What am I doing right now? And then change that to something else. Place your attention on something else. Okay. And there's kind of a thought process and words you can say to yourself to kind of do that. But effectively, you want to go from maybe feeling angry, right, and start moving up the states of consciousness to where instead of feeling angry, maybe you can feel grateful for the person who triggered you that led you to feel angry, because it was an opportunity for you to work on managing your anger, right? And so instead of feeling angry at that person, I'm actually going to feel grateful for them, grateful that they helped me to grow myself, to work on myself. Now, if we think about this also in kind of a physical form, right? Because I know when we talk about things like emotions and states of consciousness, a lot of times we're trying to figure it out in our logical brain, and it's hard to do. And so let me kind of explain it in another way to you as well. Imagine that, you come to work and I'm your boss, and you come into work and I say, okay, what you're going to do today is a whole bunch of push-ups. So get down on the ground and start doing push-ups. Now, depending on how fit you are, some of us can do a few, maybe you can do 100 or 200. And as you're doing those push-ups and you're down on the ground, you start to get tired. Now, if you're in a toxic environment, then as a boss, I might tell you, as you start to slow down, I'm like, nope, you keep going. You don't stop. You keep going, no stopping, keep doing the push-ups. But the more that you start pushing, the harder and the harder and the harder and the harder that it gets. And at some point, you're going to meet some breaking point. There's going to be some point where you just collapse. And so again, we can see this often in things like physical training, right? Running, doing push-ups, other things like that, pushing yourself as far as you can go. And at some point you break. Now, if I am forcing you to do push-ups without any breaks, then in a very short period of time, you're probably going to collapse on the floor. However, if you're doing those push-ups, you're going down into that, and then you take some breaks, you go get some water, you do, and you come back to it again, you're not going to burn out as quickly. Okay. And so again, this is how this kind of ties together is, if you're feeling burned out, it's probably because that's where you're placing your attention. Can you place your attention somewhere else? Can you take a little break? Right? Because if you don't, you're going to collapse on the floor, just like if you were doing the push-ups. Okay. So this is how these kind of tie together. And sometimes it means you just have to remove yourself. You might have to breathe a little bit, do some different exercises that work for you to kind of calm yourself down and get yourself centered and recharge your battery. That's why doing things like taking breaks, going out in nature, walking, singing to yourself, doing a little chair dance, whatever it might be, to help you kind of change your state of consciousness, change your emotions, will help you to get pulled out of that burnout. And the more that you can stay out of it, the better it is, because you won't get to that point. Now, that's kind of what I wanted to go through today and talk a little bit about, because like I said, I didn't get to talk about that with Phil or kind of make that connection. So hopefully you understand that. I know it's taken me a long time to learn it and to live it. But if you have questions, leave comments below, reach out to me, because I'm always happy to do more live videos about this as well. Because ultimately I want you to be happy. I want you to avoid burnout. I want you to place your attention on those things that light you up and make you happy, because the happier you are, the happier the people around you are, and the better this world is in general. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today, and I will see you on the next video.